I gotta try me some boiled peanuts, I reckon.
Nothing better than hot, juicy, salty nuts in your mouth, man.
Oh my goodness. Big old, yeah. But
It's hard growing up in the South. Trying to squeeze a dollar from a nickel just to put food in my little boy's mouth. I ain't got nothing left except the shoes on my feet and the heart in my chest, Lord. Just keep me beating for a couple of days so I can get this paycheck, keep these damn bills paid. They try to say we got it made low.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back. We are actually a long way from home today. We left the house about 5:30 this morning. It's currently 2 p.m. local time. We're actually in Indiana for the week, doing a ride along with a coworker of mine that's the sales rep for Monty's here in Indiana. Should be a fun week, but y'all stay tuned and let's see what we can get into.
all right. So Colby Ireland.
Howdy.
Brian McAfee with Monty's. Monty's Plant and Soil Products. You're from Marshall, Indiana? Wallace, Marshall. We talked about that's next town down. We drove through it.
Yep.
Yeah. So you're a corn, bean,
And wheat.
and wheat. Can't break the habit of growing wheat.
Nope.
Dang it. I know the feeling. So I'd like the punishment as well.
I like that. I like dealing with straw, and I like that kind of, the wheat for me is kind of a extra paycheck in the middle of the year.
Middle of summer,
Yeah.
right. It can be demanding at times. So with that being said, how long you been farming on your own, or how long you been in agriculture? Your whole life, or?
So this will be my 8th year going on by myself, but I've been in agriculture all my life, raised up on the family farm. I've worked for the neighbors running their equipment. Back in 13? I don't know if I told you I was on the harvest crew.
No, that's pretty
Out west.
interesting. Let's
Yeah.
talk about that again. Yeah, absolutely.
Did that, and then just, I don't know, agriculture's been a big part of my life growing up, so fell in love with it, and I can't get away from it now.
So you've seen, Colby, you've seen several different practices. I do know you have past experience working for a large operation. You've worked with local, I call average size farms, my kind of size of farm, because we're still in the single digit thousands.
Yeah, not out west in the.
Yeah. So with that said, though, I know you've contacted me. We've had a really interesting start here and seen some good results with Monty's products and so forth. But the one thing that's caught me I've respected so far working with you is that you're willing to learn and think outside the box. And is that one of the reasons you reached out to us, was just to see if there's something different out there?
Absolutely. Like, obviously, I've watched the Corn Warriors and just things on YouTube and stuff, and wondering why can't I apply that practice to my farm and see if it'll better me.
Right. There's a lot of value to what's got the agriculture community where it is now. Tried, true, and proven methods. But if we're not always pushing the envelope to try something different, and we stay with the crowd, we're soon going to be on the outside looking in.
Absolutely.
And so I think today, as we drove around and looked at crops and scouted and so forth, we've learned there's some improvements that can be done, techniques that can be changed. And the thing is, if you're closed-minded and don't try different things, you're going to go backwards pretty quick. We're also, as an industry, going to be forced to make these changes, and those that make it sooner are going to be much better off down the road. What are a couple things that you've seen that are a must change in your operation? Maybe agronomically, could be tied to Monty's, could be. What do you see as a must change that you might see coming down the road for yourself?
I see maybe a little bit lighter on my tillage practices. I see 2x2 going on the planter very soon.
Yeah.
And just trying to get away from broadcasting fertilizer. Not necessarily get away from it, but just start lowering my usage of it.
Be more efficient with
Be
it.
more efficient, yes, and get away from anhydrous. There's a lot of guys like my dad, he forced anhydrous for years. I put on a lot of gas for the co-op when I worked here. And I rather use 28 or 32%.
And we seen that today where this was a kind of a year where that 28% would be a bit beneficial in these conditions, because the nitrate portion that comes out and so forth. But that comes with other problems. That comes with, we have to buffer that pH. But then again, ammonia, also gas, has its own problems too. It's hard on the soil and so forth. Cost per unit's obviously better with the gas.
It is, but the risk is higher.
Much higher.
Question from the guy behind the camera, because name of the channel is Down South Farming. I'm from the Southeast. Everything I do, even though this is only the third or fourth video, everything we've done so far has been Southeastern farming. What is the premise or the upside of using anhydrous versus what I would consider more traditional in the Southeast, being your 28% UAN, 32% nitrogen, things like that?
Cheaper.
Availability here too.
Yes, it's readily available to us.
Okay.
And it's easy to get a hold of. It's cheaper, and just
it's an off-season thing that you can do as well. At least it was in our local county.
Yeah, a lot of guys, they want to put it on. They put it on in the fall. I put it on in the spring just because I've got time to.
And Colby is from, for those that may watch this or see this, from Central Indiana, West Central Indiana, right against the Illinois border, basically.
Yep.
Right at the edge of what I call prairie dirt. You actually have some prairie dirt.
I have some prairie dirt, and I got some heavy clay.
Yes, you do have some. You have a variety. I will give you that.
Yeah.
Where I'm from in southern Indiana, I'm in the old forest lands. It was all forest at one point in time. Highly erodible grounds. And the practices you guys have up here has been rather shocking for me. And Clay and I've talked about this a bit from the guys in the South even, versus the prairie guys. They've not had to change a whole lot because their ground's been pretty forgiving. But you're seeing on some of your clays, it's tough. Lower CEC soils, the more we spoon feed these crops, the more we use products like humics and biostimulants and so forth, the more efficient we can be with that. We were forced, I want to kind of refer back to the gas. We were forced to get rid of anhydrous because of a couple events. But one was Mike, and he just passed away. He lost an anhydrous tank. We have very hilly ground, as you've seen when you come down to visit our place to pick up those boxes. He lost the anhydrous tank, and that safety valve was supposed to shut.
It didn't shut.
It didn't shut. It's straight across from the school, the elementary, middle school, and high school.
Oh my gosh!
That gas cloud just skirted the building. Co-ops, that's it. We're done. That was it. Well, the last tank, they shut it down. There is no anhydrous in our area. And the funny thing was, when they took it away, we all were fired up. I mean, we were built around that. What we found quickly was a couple things. That was right in the 90s. Actually, that would have been 89 or 90, right? Been 89, I think. It was 90, either way. It's close enough. That's when we all converted to no-till. The combination of removing that harsh gas and going no-till, to reiterate the things that you talked about, that you brought up, no-till or a minimum till type of situation, whether it's strip till or no-till. And now cover crops have come into play. Now we're using stuff like carbons, biostimulants to help buffer the pH. It's all back to user friendly, but what we seen was when we went, before we got into cover crops, just as the start of no-till, all of a sudden our yields will start going up, and up. And we had to work so much harder to hit yields that you guys not you, but I'm saying just a little north of here,
absolutely,
would accidentally fall into 200, now 240 is pretty common. Well, shoot, we had to work our tail off to get that on these.
Yeah, like what they say over in Illinois. I mean, you can take a handful of soybeans, toss them out on the ground, not even look at them, and they're,
Yeah.
impressive beans. And
Absolutely. Now, there's some fantastic growers I've run across the state, and in your area, we've talked about several of them. I've been very impressed with your bean stand today and the looks of your beans. We got some work to do on the corn side, or you're already addressing that.
yes,
But doing the 2x2, did you see some of the values of the things we talked about?
I did.
Yeah. But in doing that, one of our products with Monty's that we offer is our carbon. The closer you move those nutrients to the seed or that salt load to the seed, the more we need to protect that seed, or excuse me, those roots from getting burnt, getting phyto burned, so forth. And that's where the carbon and sugar is going to come into play. I like that you're thinking of spoon feeding those nutrients, because I know your CECs can't be too high, like 12,
Yeah.
15 maybe, if you're lucky. So it's not like you can store a lot of nutrients in that soil. Anything we can do, you go no-till, allow that biology. We talked about the worms, get that up. But I will say you've got a fantastic operation. I mean, you do run green equipment. I guess we'll deal with that.
hey, I got one red tractor over
I
there.
do see the old red tractor. But this is coming from a guy that's worked for a case dealer. Wife's worked for a case ice dealership for, she said this morning, 37 years. I didn't even realize that.
Wow.
Now, you was a John Deere mechanic, right?
I was a John Deere mechanic for a little bit. Right when I graduated high school, Reynolds and Fishers gave me the opportunity
Yeah.
to work for them, and I did, and I learned loads about new equipment.
And then you worked on that harvest crew, so that helped you. Was it Deere equipment?
No, it was red.
No,
It
really?
was all red equipment.
Flagship rig?
We had MX 280s running the carts, and we had 8230s as combines.
Nice.
And
Yeah, the 30 series, right.
I did like running them. I'm
Yeah,
true green,
you're
but
green. Yeah.
I don't mind running a red piece of equipment.
Yeah.
But
Well,
funny story, my best friend I grew up, I've known him all my life. He's a red guy, and he's works for one of the local dealerships.
oh, for red?
Yeah.
Yeah. Here's my thoughts, and this goes back to anything in life, whether it's working with your fertilizer dealer, your chemical dealer, your equipment dealer. It's about the service that's provided. Do they follow through? Do they do the things they ask you to do? And if you know the equipment, you gotta know.
Yeah, and that's kind of one of the things I'm proud about myself is, like, say, one of my pieces of equipment goes down, I have the knowledge, I have the shop, I have the tools, I can do it myself. Instead of calling whoever, hey, come fix my stuff for me, and next thing you know, you've got $190 service charge, hourly rate coming out there, and small guys like me, you start racking up bills like that, it starts hurting the wall pretty hard.
Pretty hard. Yeah, and I tell you, but we have to also be careful that we don't try to do too much.
Yep.
And I notice you have quite a few employees around here. You have Ruger laying down here on the ground.
Yeah, he's
working pretty hard.
It's not much.
And your dad, he's got rounds to do.
Yeah.
So
He keeps an eye on things. He's a shuttle service.
In all seriousness, you're on your own, aren't you?
Yep.
And you do how many acres again?
Right around 6.5.
That's a lot
6
by yourself.
Yeah.
Almost makes you want to put a motorcycle carrier on the back of that
Hey,
combine and haul it around.
I have a hitch on my Ranger.
Do you
So I
really?
drag the Ranger with me.
That's actually pretty smart.
A lot of times it's hoofing though.
So where do you see yourself? I know we talked about I know for short term you want to look at doing 2x2 and maybe changing some of your tillage as we discussed. What's your thoughts on doing those? I know what my thoughts would be, but I'd like to hear what your thoughts after we've talked a little bit today. What's making you think to do that?
Just personal preference and seeing it and watching it work. That is, the proof's in the pudding, pretty much.
Yeah.
It works.
There's some tricks and tips to doing it. We've learned the hard way. We're on all HEL ground, highly erodible ground where I'm from. No-till certainly is awesome. I think there's a place and practice for all three of them.
There
but
is.
And there's a time and there's a conversion of how you want to do that. In a one-man show, no-till's definitely going to be beneficial to you, but if it's not managed properly, it can be a problem. 2x2. Same answer to that, right?
Right.
I heard you say it earlier, we was talking about that. Why do you think 2x2? What values have you seen from 2x2?
From just where your placement on the fertilizer is, I mean, getting to that V5 stage. Your roots are coming out, them hairs are coming out. Get that fertilizer right there where it is available.
So
Instead of quote unquote knife and gas on, and maybe you have a rough year like this year, and maybe your nitrogen isn't available yet to that plant, and it's 8 inches in the ground.
how many days have it been since you had a rain prior to this one? From the time you planted till you got your first rain?
35 days.
35 days. So even in my area, I know I'm all the way down on the Ohio River, but from that time frame, we've not had much heat.
No.
So we had a very unique situation. You understand that biology is driven by temperature and moisture and available food source. If we're not making amino acids through that conversion of the plant, we're not feeding it, everything's just kind of sitting there. And really driving around, it's been pretty shocking driving around and seeing these crops, and those, you can really tell those that are running a 2x2 or some sort of spoon-fed program. You can have all the nutrients you want, but a year like this, if there's no water or no heat to get those things moving and water soluble, it's tough. It's real tough. So I'm glad to hear you say that, because whatever products you go, obviously Monty's Plant and Soil Products makes a myriad of products to work for that, but just that concept of spoon feeding the crop.
Yeah.
So, where do you see your operation going long term? Are you wanting to grow it? Are you? I actually wanted to ask this earlier and I forgot to.
I would love to grow. I want to grow. I don't want to be, I don't want to be an 9,000 acre farmer. If I could get 2,000 acres, and maybe, like, I do have a lot of friends that do come and help me. Thank God for that.
Yeah.
They'll drive truck for me, run tractor, whatever, in their free time. And I just want to grow.
Yeah.
I want to get to about that number, and I also want to be one of the successful young ones around here.
It's good.
I've got a lot of big competition around me,
You absolutely do.
and they're highly respectable people that I would like to I kind of want to be in that same respect level that I have for them.
Right. Sometimes doing the things that are right are not easy. Right. Those are tough. And sometimes you're going against the grain. People are going to probably think you're crazy, some of the things you do, but, keep doing what you think is right, educating yourself, surround yourself with the right people. And some of the people I've heard you talk about, pretty impressive. And some of the crops I've seen, you can tell the ones that are that next step. And you can tell the ones that are trying to cut corners. You can't save yourself to profitability.
No, you
can't cut yourself to profitability. And I'm not saying be cheap. I'm not saying not be smart. We have to be fiscally, responsible, smart, and there's a happy medium. What I don't want to see you do, or any grower, because I've been doing this most of my life, is that wild, drastic change. But let's make
Slow changes through it. It's farming. You're always preparing yourself for the next year. Not this year, next year. What do I want to do next year already?
Yeah. No, we've been having that conversation this afternoon, I tell you, you should be very proud. You got a nice place, nice shop.
Thank you.
I walk in here, I wish my shop was this nice. But no, you've got a nice place. I really like the fact you may be from a multi-generational farm, but you're thinking like a first gen farmer. And I work with a myriad of growers, some very, very well-respected 5-6 generation growers, and I work with some first gen. And all of those that are willing to be open-minded, it's pretty interesting what they're seeing.
Absolutely.
Now, there's nothing wrong with staying with more traditional until you've mastered some of those things, but there's some more common sense things. But yeah, I appreciate the time you gave Clay and I today. It's been fun.
Yep.
Been
Thank
very
you.
Yeah, I just want to tell you firsthand, thank you. I know I've been behind the camera all day, but we've had some great conversation off camera, and I've learned a lot from both of you guys. You know, it's out of my comfort zone to be up here, but it's absolutely awesome just to see what y'all do and how different it is. So I appreciate that.
So why the carbon and sugar and why you've seen such good emergence here is I like to say it's pretty much a 3-step process. Carbon's going to come in here and it's going to amend the soil, and we're focusing on the rhizosphere around that seed when we do an in-furrow carbon sugar pass. You can certainly broadcast carbon and sugar, and I like that because we can treat the whole soil profile, but let's stay focused on this in-furrow. What you've seen, because you planted so early in cold, cool conditions, and you notice when you stuck your finger in here, it was warmer, even a 40-degree day, that furrow was warmer. It's because we blew up the biology in that 72-hour window that you were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is, if we buffer the pH here, but we don't put any sugar, that's fine. It works good in amongst itself. Or if you're a guy that just runs sugar and you don't buffer the pH, you're going to make more water-soluble nutrients, because that's what sugar does. It's a biostimulant. You're feeding the soil, the microbiology. That's all the leaves are doing. They're creating root exudates that give amino acids in the soil that feed, I'm keeping some of this basic, but you're feeding your biology, which then turns into water-soluble nutrients to bring it back in the plant. So the 3-step process: carbon creates the rhizosphere, the environment for the biology to flourish. You give it gasoline, that biology explodes, or
give it sugar, and that's what feeds the biology.
Feeds the biology. The biology now has an environment that's safe and healthy for it to blow up in. It blows up, it water solubilizes any nutrients in that zone. The biology collapses because it's done. It's used up all that energy, whether it be sugar, nitrogen, whatever. It's done, it's collapsed. But here's where the magic comes in with Monty's liquid carbon and humic products, is it keeps that in a water soluble form, because 72 hours later, early April, those beans weren't sprouted, were they?
No.
Those beans were still laying in there. They weren't out of the ground. They weren't creating a photosynthesis process, which is then creating sugars. And we know plants give off 30-35% of their sugars to root exudates in return for nutrients. So what's so critical about that is we've now water solubilized those nutrients. Those plants can now, or that nutrient can't get tied back up, because we've neutralized the soil, not neutralized it, but buffered the pH to allow, and carbon has the natural ability to hold cations anyways, and to increase your CEC as a whole. So we are holding it in place until that plant can utilize it, versus an unbuffered soil. We know there's no consistent pH throughout the field. You can get an average, but you're going to have high and low spots, typically low in our environment, low pH. So what happens is that low pH, if you water solubilize a phosphate, that's one of the first to get tied up. It's just going to get tied right back up if you don't have a carbon there. So again, we treat the soil on the front side with carbon going in furrows, going to, on the front side, get the environment right immediately. Sugar's going to blow up the biology. It's going to collapse, and then carbon comes in on the back side and holds it in place. Carbon has the ability to increase water hold capacity, reduce compaction. But for you, the magic that you've seen this year, and you've got this good stand, is you lit up this zone, your biology, which then created a micro environment right here that others struggled with because it was so cold and there was no active biology. And you You artificially blew it up. And I always love to use this analogy. It's like an old John Deere VE or old John Deere popper, you know, twin cylinder. Pop open the cockpits, get it to top dead center. If you got a hand crank, pull the choke out. You turn the valve to A to the back tank, which is your gas. And if most guys just run gas and gas, but in the old days it had been diesel. You fire that thing up. So we've thrown the carbon sugar, we've fired it up. We've got it going.
The
right?
first crank and it's running perfect.
We're starting it on gas and we're lighting it up with gas. You flip it over to B once the engine's warm, and that's where the carbon comes in. And something else we'll talk about down the road is some other biostimulants that can be that diesel fuel to help keep that biology, smooth out that, instead of just boom and down. We have some other products that we brought on this year that I'm using, and they will hold that biology at a high level. It's an algae type product. We'll hold that at a high level for 15 days. So that's what we really like. I like what you've done here, and it's cool to, really interesting, I should say is a better word to say it. I've heard other people say that. I personally haven't done it, but we have seen micro environmental differences where that sugar's at and warming that zone up a little bit. But it's really about biology. If this biology's dead, it don't matter. We got to have that biology to make this look good. And the noduling you have on those beans, look at the nodules.
That's nuts.
For V3 beans, these look great. They look really good. Like Clay said earlier, I like seeing these out on the laterals. We're still down here on the main root, tap root if you want to call it. And then you look here, look at that. We have nice color, so that one's active as can be. Active. You're rolling. You're set up good. Now let's keep them good. We're hurting our sugar factory, as I like to refer it to, by having this feeding with the insects. Because everywhere it's cutting it, anything out here that's making photosynthesis is not making it into the plant, because it's cut the veins. So everything out here, you've lost photosynthesis from that amount of that leaf. And that's a pretty good.
That's a big hole right there.
Look at here. This is more impactful. You lost 1, 2, 3, 4, and you're seeing it on your upper growth. Let's start protecting this most recent trifoliate that's opened up to reduce the feeding. So your cotyledons were here, and that's what comes up out of the ground and opens up. They were here. They've fallen off, and that's going to be down here. You can see one on the ground right there. You can see your cotyledons have fallen off. We'd like to work on that in the future to try to keep those as long as possible. But back to it. This is your unicotyledon. You can see you've had some feeding, so that's where I said let's get some insecticide out here. But at your unicotyledon, V1 is your first trifoliate, second, third, fourth, and the V stages will continue on. Soybeans are unique in the fact that they continue to do reproductive and vegetative at the same time. Whereas corn, it's VE for emergence, and then V1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way through until you hit R1.
And then
it's actually VT R1. So you have a vegetative stage and then reproductive. Soybeans can do both vegetative and reproductive, because you'll start flowering probably within the next week or two would be my guess. I would say probably if we was to come back next week, you would start having flowers. That is R1.
so right, the first flower would be R1.
Yeah. And then we'll get R2s when it's basically to the top of canopy, and then R3, 4, 5, and so forth. And we'll go each through stage as I come back. But right now is a good time to get that post on, and you did. In fact, I'm going to start spraying my own personal when I get home here at the end of the week. But I like this. You're good. You got good population. I would like to see you back off a little bit from what,
From what I did this.
Yeah.
Back off about 10, 20,000.
Yeah, and the reason being, but be careful. You need to talk to your rep for your seed and find out where do you want that target rate. Maybe he wants you at 150.
See, he actually wanted me at 155.
Okay, then you need to follow his rec. So don't follow me on that, because here's why I want to go back. The reason why is depends on lateral branching. What we want to do is now we can start thinking about, you've got a rain, we got healthy looking beans, we have potential here. What are we going to do to drive flowering and flower retention? In fact, you've already got not flowering, but it's going to be right there. It's coming pretty soon. So we can start considering a first foliar application before long. Now, as short as the beans are, go ahead. As short as the bean, they're tall, so don't get me wrong. But because they're not 15-inch, if you come out with a foliar application, a lot of it's going to go on the ground right now.
Yeah.
Maybe block off every other one with a block if you got 15-inch centers on your sprayer.
Make it center or 30.
Right over the top of it. And that's where at R1, I would come in with midnight and a quart of sugar and a quart of surge.
Okay.
Did you? So first thing I'm looking for right here is look at your fibrous hair. See the fibrous roots?
Mm-hmm.
That is what we want. We want to see these fibrous roots. This one here is, I'm trying to get to the seed. Without damaging it. I done it, Clay. I should have just dug out with a shovel. It's being a pain in the neck. All right. Look at this rascal versus this rascal. This specimen here. They're rooting down. Seed's missing, isn't it, Clay? Right there's where it was at, right there. He had good depth. See that? In fact, this one may have went in way deep. Would you agree with me? That's your radical right there. The seed's just gone because it's so late in the season, or so late now.
Probably 2.25 inches in.
You are 2 1/4, and I'm not worried about 2 1/4. As long as the other one was at 2 1/4.
Yeah.
The other one was at 2 1/4. We're getting ready to find out now.
See where.
So this is 2 1/4, which could be why. Side by side. This one is at 2 1/4. And now let's see what this one's at. Right there's the seed. There you go. That's exactly what's going on. There's the seed. Can you see it?
That was at 2 1/2 or 1.5, 1 3/4.
1 3/4. That's the problem. This one was just deeper. It was cold when you planted it. This one probably got a warm day and come up. You're really at about 2 inches with this, and that was about 1/4 to 1/2 inch deeper. But look what the humics have done for you. This one even has good fibrous rooting. We're looking for fibrous rooting. We're looking for good. That came off of probably that one. But we're looking, here's your radical shooting out. It's not as healthy as I wanted to see. Look at your seminal. Look at this seminal. It's a seminal root. That's the one that's going to run right down the furrow typically and scavenge any roots or any nutrients. And then these are your nodal roots. This is what's hitting that 2x2 band. If we had a 2x2 band, it'd be rocking and rolling right now. I'm just such a proponent now that I know more and more about 2x2. This is it. We'll talk about some programs of what you should probably be thinking about.
Okay.
But with a 2x2, again, it's all about emergence. I like that you're going to look at your meters next year. Let's look at that. Try to keep consistent depth. Get the 2x2 going so that once
we run out of the seed after about 6 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks. Just quit eating off the seed and off the water-soluble nutrients in the furrow. We switch to nodal roots, and you have excellent nodal roots. I mean, look at the fibers; those are pretty healthy. I'd like to see more matting, but we could have broke a bunch off. In fact, when we did, there's one, there's a big one, you know. So who knows how many we ripped off. The more of this, the more soil contact we have, the more nutrients we uptake, more water, just the whole thing. Okay. A couple things happened here. What was your plant date, you think, on this?
On this, April 28th.
What were the conditions like, Colby, on April 28th?
Sunny, moderate,
What were the conditions, say, the following week to 2 weeks afterwards?
cold.
Oh. Seed depths right here, so we're probably dropping 1.5 inches on this particular one. Right here's the seed. It wants to go right back to where it was at, so we're right at just above the crown, right there, about 1.5 inches. This one, about 2 inches. This one, super shallow. No, not necessarily. This one kind of, the mesocotyle and the crown set way lower than I expected. The seed is right. Would you agree that's a seed right there? It looks like a seed to me.
Yeah.
Yep, purple. You're about 1.5 to 1.75 in that window. I want to show you something on your mesocotyle. Clay, you probably don't see this as much in the south as we do here. That thing was goosenecking, or as that mesocotyle was pushing up to break the surface, it was fighting
It's way up.
its way up. It would get cold at night and turn down. Get warm, it'd come up. Get cold at night, it'd turn down. Get warm, it'd come up. When you see that, instead of that mesocotyle turning and going straight up, see how it came out? It was kind of cool, sprouted, came up, got a warm day, got a cool night, kind of turn back up. So what I was taught from our seed people is that's what causes that. Look at this one here. This one's really unique. This one really struggled. It just was shallow. Yeah, here you go. Look at here. It actually grew down.
And then
It grew down and then back up. And it was probably because it was planted a little bit shallower. It was more sensitive to the cool nights when we got down into 30s in that time frame, because I do know we got below freezing in a time frame.
yeah,
It went down to the warmth, turned as it got sun and started coming back up. And then here, this one was more consistent and even, and you're right at a 2-inch depth. So this one, obviously it had some turning, but it wasn't nearly as
dramatic as
that.
yeah,
That's correct. That's correct. A couple things could have happened there. You could have had sloughing, because this was pretty dry when you planted, wasn't it? I mean, pretty fit conditions. And one of the things we're seeing, or I've seen as I've been out here, is with that soil being that dry, we're probably getting some sloughing off as your seed disc openers. Before the seed fell down into that true V, the sidewalls sloughed off maybe in that spot, but the integrity of the wall was falling apart, and then it came back with this one. Could have sloughed off enough right here that we didn't have these two come up at all, because they were up. If we dig around, I bet they're either going to be super shallow or they're going to be super deep, or even if they didn't come out of the ground. But my point back to, without wasting time, this one here, because it was so shallow, it went down seeking warmth.
to get away from the cold.
Went down seeking warmth. So that's a good probability. We obviously are way late now, but that's what it's telling us. That's the story I'm seeing. Now I could be totally off base, and somebody could tell me, Brian, you're way off base and wrong, but from my past experience, that's telling me that that's what it did. It sprouted, it went down for warmth, it warmed back up, and then it started coming on back out. But it obviously was impacted
by the cold weather and
depth, seed depth. This one probably, like I said, sloughed off, caused that seed to be a little higher. And your wall, because you're seeing it all the way up and down through here.
I can't even find a seed.
That's why I said it's what makes me wonder if it isn't the same as we seen earlier when we was walking the field, if it didn't fall on top of the ground and then was consumed by some critter or something like that. So it just doesn't seem like it's there, but we're awful late now to be looking for seeds on top of the ground.
but we can take this info and apply it to next year, or this fall, to the planter.
This is your best tool next year.
Well, I ain't got one of them.
I know this is my personal McAfee Bros from. We need to get you some though.
I've got one in the truck I can give you.
Yeah,
It's got precision planting on it.
that's fine. But these, if you don't have one of these,
I got one, but it's about this long and it goes on a keychain.
no, we need to get you a real one. We need to get you several. But you need to lay it, when you do this, I'll say precision planting they have changed, in my opinion, been the best thing for me personally. When you do this, make sure that you're setting it down. You need to use 2 of them, get flat, because if you're measuring off the top of these ridges, you're not getting the correct depth. We need to get in here and we need to make sure it's level with the top of where that seed's going to emerge from. Right there. And then measure it. That first day, you should have 0 anticipation of getting anything planted. It should be all about getting it set right. And just because you use those blocks or you set it in your garage at 2-inch,
that doesn't mean it's going to be the same out here in the field.
it's not. Conditions are going to change.
Soil types are going to change.
And so you need to get out here. And we have flat seen it on this trip to where these seed trenches are sloughing off. And that seed, it's not that the planter's going up and down, because the planter's clearly staying in place. It's the seed depth that's changing because your sidewalls are falling apart. They're not staying firm enough. Couple things are going to need to change in that situation. We need to look at, are your gauge wheels set properly? Do we have enough downforce? Too much downforce? We'll just have to play with it and see how it is a season, when you're out here planting earlier. Just got to look and let it tell you what it's doing. Like plant, stop, and look between your packing wheels, that trench, and see if it's sloughed off before it gets closed up.
And if it has back off, you've got too much down pressure going, or your wheels aren't set right.
Yeah. Or you've worked the ground too much and it's too fluffy.
It needs a rain for it to firm back up. Then
Firm it up a little bit. Yeah. There's a lot of factors there, but clearly we need to get these separated. That's going to impact your yield. A penetrometer, and one of the things that we were showing Clay is we first started on the inroads because of severe compaction. And one of the things I wanted to show him is what I discovered on my own operation with my brother, is how compaction really impacts your plants. Roots cannot penetrate 300 pounds or more. They start getting impacted at 200 and 300. They can't go through it. So, Colby, you ran in-furrow premium blend. We blended it up for you at Monty's. Premium blend. I think you said 5 gallon the acre, if I remember right. Zinc at 1 quart, carbon at 2 quarts, and we had a couple quarts of sugar.
Yep.
We ran it in furrow. So go on and run it here off the side. And this is off the side where you're in furrow. This is going to be the penetrometer. He hit that hard pan. He's pushing as hard as he can. You got down a little deeper that time than we did last time. Go on and pull it back up. I'm holding it. So you actually made it deeper than we've been doing. We have been hitting 4 inches. So we're at 3, 6, call it 7 inches. Now go right where the in furrow is and do it there. Just went in like butter. Go on, pull it back out. This one wasn't nearly as impactful as the last one, so we could do it again, but you seen how much smoother
It went in.
it went in right out of the gate until you hit that hard pan again. Go on over here and we'll do another one. Do right off the side there. Of course, the very first one we do.
Yeah.
You're hitting that hard pan at about 7-8 inches there. Now go in.